Have you ever found yourself in a place where everything feels like it's falling apart, where doubt seems to flood your mind, and the pain of shattered expectations weighs heavily on your heart? In these moments, it's natural to question why God allows us to endure such deep sorrow and hardship. You may wonder, why me? Why now? Where is God in all of this? These are not just abstract questions, but real cries from a soul in pain, yearning for answers, for meaning, for some sign that God has not abandoned you in your time of need. But here's the hopeful truth, one that often seems hidden in the darkest moments. It is precisely in these times of suffering that God is at work in ways we cannot yet understand. The pain you feel, the confusion that clouds your mind, these are not signs of God's absence. In fact, they may be indicators that God is drawing you into a deeper relationship with Him, refining your faith, and preparing you for a future you cannot yet see. As Lewis suggests, these trials are not random or pointless. They are part of God's plan to shape you into someone stronger, someone more aligned with His purpose. And this shaping process, though painful, is where the real work of faith happens. Imagine a piece of metal being forged into a sword. The blacksmith heats the metal in the fire, hammering it repeatedly, shaping and sharpening it until it becomes something powerful, something that can withstand battle. In the same way, your faith is being forged in the fires of hardship. You may feel the heat of life's challenges, the blows of disappointment and grief. But it's in this process that God is refining you, removing impurities and strengthening your spirit. Though you may not see it now, this season of suffering is not the end. It's a part of a larger story, one that leads to growth, to strength, and to a deeper, more resilient faith. When we face difficulties, it's easy to feel isolated, as though no one else can understand the depth of our pain. But let me ask you, is it possible that this very loneliness, this feeling of abandonment, is the place where God's voice is the loudest? If only we could quiet the noise of our doubts long enough to listen. Many times, it's in our silence, in our brokenness, that God speaks most clearly. And He's not telling us that we must have all the answers or be free from doubt. He's simply asking us to trust Him in the storm, to cling to the hope that He is working all things for our good, even when we can't see the full picture. Lewis's reflections on faith and hardship encourage us to shift our perspective. He suggests that our trials are not just random moments of suffering, but are in fact preparing us for something greater. This doesn't mean we should dismiss the pain or act as if it doesn't hurt. On the contrary, we must acknowledge the depth of our struggles, but at the same time, we must trust that there is meaning in the midst of the suffering. We are being shaped, even when it feels like we are being broken. It's easy to believe in God when life is going smoothly, when the path ahead is clear, and our plans fall perfectly into place. But true faith is forged in the valleys, not on the mountaintops. It's when life doesn't go according to plan, when we feel lost, hurt, and confused, that our faith is tested and strengthened. As the Bible tells us in Romans 5 verse 3-4, we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character. Hope. God is not only with you in the valley, He is using it to produce in you a hope that cannot be shaken, a hope that is rooted in His eternal promises. As you reflect on these words, stay with us. We are just beginning to explore the depths of what it means to maintain faith during life's storms. This is not just about surviving hardship, it's about finding meaning in the midst of it, discovering how God is using these moments to draw you closer to Him and to shape you for the extraordinary destiny He has planned for you. If this resonates with you, if you feel the weight of these words in your soul, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's continue this journey together as we dig deeper into Lewis's wisdom and the scriptures, finding hope and purpose in every trial. Can I get a thank you, Jesus, from you? In Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis offers a profound reflection on the nature of hope, challenging the common misconception that focusing on eternity is escapism. He reminds us that true hope is a theological virtue, one that compels Christians to fix their hearts on heaven without abandoning the world they live in. But what does it mean to aim for heaven while still being grounded on earth? Lewis points out that history reveals a significant truth. Those Christians who most deeply impacted society were precisely the ones whose minds were set on the eternal. The apostles, for example, fueled by their vision of heaven, played a pivotal role in transforming the Roman Empire. Similarly, Christian reformers who fought for justice, such as the abolitionists of the slave trade, were driven not by mere earthly concerns, but by a hope that transcended this world. Lewis' insight brings up an essential question for us today. Have we, too, lost sight of this eternal perspective. How often do we find ourselves consumed by the present world's troubles, forgetting that our ultimate aim should be heaven? In a time where worldly distractions are plenty, it's easy to lose our focus. Lewis asserts that when we aim only at the earth, we end up with nothing. But when we direct our gaze towards heaven, we gain both the world and something far greater. How different would our lives look if we began every day with this mindset? Perhaps the true strength of hope lies not in escapism, but in its ability to anchor us, giving us a sense of purpose that transcends the present struggles. Just as Lewis cautions, to be truly effective on earth, we must first align our hearts with heaven. The lesson Lewis offers is simple yet profound. Hope rooted in eternity allows us to make meaningful changes here and now. As he beautifully puts it, aim at heaven, and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth, and you will get neither. Does this challenge us to reconsider where we've placed our hope? It's a profound thought, isn't it? The tension between living fully in this world while yearning for heaven. C.S. Lewis, in his works, often explores the human struggle to balance our earthly existence with a deeper longing for something eternal. But what does it mean to truly desire heaven? Is it merely about escaping the pain and burdens of life or reuniting with those we've lost? Or is it something far deeper, a yearning for the divine itself? Lewis suggests that many of us struggle to desire heaven for what it truly is because our entire lives are oriented toward the things of this world. From an early age, we're taught to pursue tangible goals, success, relationships, personal achievement. We're told to find our happiness here, in what we can touch, possess, or experience. Heaven, in contrast, feels distant, abstract, something we can't fully understand. Perhaps that's why it's hard to cultivate a genuine desire for it. But what if our restlessness, our constant search for fulfillment, points to something more? Lewis wrote, "If I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world, this aching for something beyond, for joy and peace that surpasses earthly understanding, might be the very seed of our desire for heaven, hidden beneath the distractions of daily life." Have you ever stopped to consider that perhaps the reason we find it difficult to focus on heaven is because we've never been fully trained to do so? Our world teaches us to cling to what is immediate, visible, and satisfying in the short term. Yet deep down, we all know these things fade. What would it look like to shift our focus toward the eternal? To embrace the idea that heaven is not just an escape, but the fulfillment of the deepest longings we carry within us? This journey toward desiring heaven for itself, as Lewis points out, requires unlearning the world's patterns. It's about retraining our hearts to seek that which we cannot yet see but somehow know is the ultimate answer to the yearnings of our souls. Have you ever paused in the stillness of a moment and felt a deep, unshakable yearning? A yearning that no accomplishment, no relationship, and no worldly pleasure seems to fill. It's as if, despite your efforts to achieve success, to find love, or to embark on grand adventures, something remains missing. C.S. Lewis profoundly captures this feeling in his writings, referring to it as the inconsolable longing in our souls for something beyond this world. He suggests that these desires, however beautiful, point us to a greater truth. Could it be that our hearts are not made for this world but for something far beyond it? Lewis writes in Mere Christianity, "If I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world." How often do we chase after achievements, believing that the next one will bring us peace, only to find ourselves longing again? It's a cycle many of us know all too well. The fleeting joy of new love, the temporary thrill of success, these are but shadows of the true joy we seek. Could it be that this ache, this restlessness, is not something to fear but to embrace as a guide? What if the emptiness we feel is not a curse but a signpost directing us toward the only one who can truly satisfy our souls? C.S. Lewis speaks to a deep and often unspoken longing within every soul, a yearning that many mistake for mere dissatisfaction with life. But what if this feeling is not failure or frustration? Lewis challenges us to consider that this inner desire is not proof of something lacking, but a profound hint that we are made for something beyond this world. Think about the natural instincts we observe. A baby cries for food because food exists, and a duckling yearns to swim because water is real. These desires are not random but are tied to something tangible. So what happens when we encounter a desire for something this world cannot provide? Lewis suggests this is a signpost pointing us to our true home, a world beyond the one we know. Earthly pleasures, while enjoyable, are incomplete by design. They are echoes, not the source of true fulfillment. Have you ever felt that restlessness after achieving what you thought would make you happy? Could it be that your soul is gently being reminded that there is more? In Mere Christianity, Lewis states, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world." This thought invites us to reflect. Could our deepest aches and desires actually be whispers from eternity, calling us to something far greater than we can imagine? In every heart, there exists a deep yearning, a longing that seems never fully satisfied by anything in this world. Have you ever wondered why, no matter how much you achieve or gain, something still feels incomplete? C.S. Lewis delves into this profound question, suggesting that this unfulfilled desire points to something beyond the material world. But how do we respond when earthly things fail to fill this void? Lewis offers us three paths, two of which lead to disappointment, and one that provides hope. The first, which Lewis calls the fool's way, is a common trap. This person, instead of recognizing the deeper significance of their longing, blames external things. Perhaps you've thought, if only I had a better job, a more fulfilling relationship, or a more extravagant lifestyle, then I would be happy. But how often does that satisfaction last? Lewis likens this to someone chasing mirages, believing the next purchase or experience will finally bring lasting joy. Yet, like sand slipping through fingers, true fulfillment eludes them. Is it not a cycle we all recognize, moving from one pursuit to another, never quite finding what we're looking for? In his work, Mere Christianity, Lewis reflects, "If I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world." Could it be that the longings we feel are not to be filled by temporary pleasures, but by something, or rather someone, eternal? Instead of endlessly searching in the wrong places, Lewis encourages us to pause and reflect on the possibility that our desires point us towards God, the only source of true satisfaction. C.S. Lewis once posed a deeply resonating question: what happens when we settle for less than what we truly long for? He describes this as the way of the disillusioned sensible man, a person who, after many disappointments, convinces themselves that their yearning for something greater is just a mirage. They tell themselves, life is simply about making do, managing expectations, and not hoping for too much. This mindset, while practical, can become a form of self-betrayal. Lewis believed that such resignation stifles the very essence of what makes us human, our God-given desire for meaning, purpose, and a connection to something beyond this world. But have you ever felt that dull ache, the one that whispers in your soul that there is more to life than just comfort or routine? If we numb ourselves to this longing, aren't we depriving ourselves of the deeper joys, the joys that come from embracing the possibility that there is something or someone greater waiting for us? Lewis's works often reflect on how we are, by design, meant for more. He famously said, "If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world." Have we allowed life's challenges to make us cynical, teaching ourselves to lower expectations just to avoid disappointment? In doing so, are we missing out on the divine adventure God has intended for us? Instead of shutting down our longing, what if we embraced it as a signpost pointing towards something higher? The world offers us countless blessings that can lift our spirits and bring us joy. But how do we strike the balance between embracing these earthly gifts and keeping our hearts focused on our eternal destination? C.S. Lewis often spoke of this tension, cautioning us not to despise the good things we experience here, for they are gifts from God. He writes in The Weight of Glory, "If we consider the unblushing promises of reward and the staggering nature of the rewards promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak." Lewis points out that our longing for true fulfillment should not settle for the temporary pleasures of this world, but should drive us towards something far greater. Think about it. How often do we mistake these fleeting moments of joy for the ultimate source of happiness? We are called to be grateful for the good things we receive. Yet, we must also recognize that these blessings are mere glimpses of a deeper reality, signposts pointing to our true home. Lewis urges us not to let the distractions of this life blur our vision of eternity. What is it that we are truly longing for? Could it be that the deep desires of our hearts are meant to lead us to a place beyond this world? A place where every longing is satisfied? Lewis spoke of a desire for our true country, a homeland we can only find after death. And this desire should not be smothered by the chaos or demands of daily life. He reminds us that while these gifts are beautiful, they are not the destination. In moments of joy, are we allowing our hearts to be stirred with a hunger for something more, something eternal? Or have we become so preoccupied with life's busyness that we have forgotten to long for our real home? This deep yearning, Lewis says, should be the heartbeat of our lives. It should inspire us to press on toward that eternal world, making it our mission not only to strive for it ourselves but also to help others on the same path. How do we live in such a way that our focus remains on the world to come, even as we enjoy the gifts of today? The answer lies in remembering that these blessings, as wonderful as they are only a foretaste of what is to come, a promise of a home where every need, every desire will finally be fulfilled. Once we grasp the concept of hope, we must also talk about faith. Why is faith so crucial to our journey as Christians? Lewis addresses this question in Mere Christianity, Book 3, chapters 11 and 12. Let's explore his thoughts on the importance of faith. First analysis: faith is a necessary virtue. Faith, as C.S. Lewis once said, is the ability to hold on to things your reason has already accepted, even when your emotions rebel. This idea resonates deeply because, as humans, we are undeniably emotional beings. Have you ever wondered why some days you feel so anchored in your beliefs, while other days, doubt seeps in like a shadow, leaving you uncertain? Lewis understood this tension well, noting that moods shift, often without explanation. You might wake up one day brimming with spiritual confidence, feeling close to God and filled with purpose. But on another day, doubts may arise, and suddenly, everything that once felt solid begins to feel distant, even improbable. I've lived through this. 2 days when my faith in Christianity seemed unshakable, followed by days where everything felt fragile and uncertain. But here's the thing. When I was an atheist, I had moments when Christianity seemed terrifyingly probable. This paradox reveals a simple truth: our moods are unreliable. Lewis emphasized that faith becomes vital because it allows us to remain steadfast, even when our emotions waver. Without it, we risk becoming like ships tossed on a stormy sea, driven by every emotional wave that comes our way. So how do we anchor ourselves? How do we learn to trust in what our reason has once accepted, even when the winds of emotion blow against us? Lewis's reflections on this subject invite us to ask ourselves deeper questions. What if our doubts and changing moods are not signs of failure, but rather reminders of the need for faith to transcend feelings? What if faith is the bridge that carries us over the turbulent waters of our emotional lives, keeping us connected to the truth we once knew? Second analysis: recognizing and managing changing moods. The journey of faith is not a straight, unwavering path, but one full of fluctuations, much like our emotions. Have you ever wondered why at times your faith feels strong, while at other moments it feels distant or even fragile? C.S. Lewis insightfully recognized this reality, acknowledging that human moods shift like the tides. And yet, these shifts don't define our faith unless we let them. What anchors us in our belief when the tides of doubt rise? Lewis speaks of the importance of deliberate action, reminding ourselves of the truths we've come to trust. Faith, unlike fleeting feelings, requires intentional nurturing. Daily prayer, reading scripture, and engaging in a faith community are essential practices, not because they magically protect us from doubt, but because they keep our hearts connected to God's truth. C.S. Lewis once noted that many people who lose their faith don't do so through logical arguments or sudden realizations. Instead, they drift away subtly because they stop practicing these vital disciplines that nurture belief. Have you considered what small practices sustain your own faith? Are they truly part of your daily life, or have they become occasional? Lewis encourages us to remain vigilant, aware that spiritual growth depends on regular and deliberate actions, even when our emotions waver. In these practices, we actively remind ourselves of the truths that may otherwise slip through our grasp. Faith, as Lewis teaches, is not self-sustaining. It requires consistent care and attention. How will you choose to nurture your faith today? Third analysis: the practice of Christian virtues. Have you ever wondered why it feels so exhausting to fight against temptation? Perhaps you've tried time and again, only to feel defeated by its overwhelming pull. C.S. Lewis insightfully suggests that the true weight of temptation is only known by those who actively resist it. Think about it. If someone surrenders after just a few minutes, how can they ever comprehend the intensity of holding out for an hour? Those who give in quickly remain unaware of the battle's full intensity. But Christ, who never succumbed to temptation, carries a unique understanding of its true power. Have you ever reflected on the fact that the one who never fell into sin is the one who grasps its enormity the most? It's through Christ's flawless resistance that we can appreciate how fierce temptation really is. In Mere Christianity, Lewis reflects, "No man knows how bad he is till he has tried very hard to be good." Isn't that a sobering realization? The more we stand firm against our weaknesses, the more we begin to grasp the unseen forces pushing against us. Can you recall moments when you tried to resist and realized how weak you felt? These moments remind us of our human limitations. The harder the battle, the clearer it becomes that we need something beyond our own strength, God's grace. Lewis's words make it clear. Resisting temptation isn't about showing our power, but about recognizing our need for God's grace. Have you noticed that the deeper the struggle, the more we're drawn to lean on Him? As our understanding of temptation grows, so too should our awareness of how essential God's grace is in overcoming the daily battles we face. Fourth analysis, recognizing our failure and need for God. There comes a moment in every believer's journey where the heart feels the weight of its own efforts falling short, no matter how earnest. Have you ever asked yourself why, despite giving your all, you still feel like it's not enough? C.S. Lewis once noted, "Relying on God has to begin all over again every day, as if nothing had yet been done." This is the beauty of our relationship with God. It isn't transactional or based solely on our good deeds. Instead, it's about a transformation of the heart, a deep and ongoing connection with our Creator. God is not after a checklist of virtuous acts but desires a soul that walks in communion with Him. How often do we find ourselves striving to live perfectly, only to discover that perfection is beyond our grasp? This realization is not a defeat but a divine invitation to surrender. In fact, Lewis reminds us that our virtues are like cold ice until they are warmed by the presence of God. Our limitations are not obstacles, they are the very means by which we come to understand our need for His grace. It's in the moment of saying, "I cannot do this alone," that we find the strength we were missing all along. Could it be that God allows us to fail so we can discover this profound truth? The surrender He calls us to is not one of weakness, but of freedom. And in that surrender, we finally embrace the truth that we were never meant to carry the weight of life's burdens on our own. Fifth analysis, relying on God to overcome our limitations. Every battle we face in life, every ounce of energy and determination we invest, brings us to a moment of realization, a moment where we stand at a critical crossroads and finally acknowledge the truth we've been avoiding. God, I cannot do this without you, but why is this moment of surrender so transformative? And why does it resonate so deeply within us? What makes the act of releasing control to God feel both like a defeat and a victory at the same time? This is because faith is not a passive state of being. It is an active, dynamic force that demands our participation. Faith doesn't simply bloom in the quiet recesses of our hearts as we sit back and wait for it to grow. It requires intentional surrender and daily trust in God, even when we feel we've been relying on Him all along. C.S. Lewis wisely observed, "Relying on God has to begin all over again every day, as if nothing had yet been done." This profound statement highlights the nature of faith as an ongoing, deliberate practice, not a one-time achievement, but a daily renewal. Have you ever noticed how quickly life's burdens seem to pile up when we try to manage them alone? Lewis understood the human tendency to drift toward self-reliance, to attempt to handle our problems in our own strength, thinking that we can carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. But faith isn't about accomplishing everything ourselves. Rather, it's about learning to lean on God through every moment, especially when we feel overwhelmed. Have you ever paused to reflect on the moments when you feel your strength fading and wondered, is God waiting for me to stop pretending I can do this on my own? When we reach that place of complete surrender, where we lay down our burdens and admit that we are not in control, we aren't admitting defeat in the way the world might see it. Instead, we are stepping into a deeper truth, a recognition that we were never meant to carry these burdens alone. In fact, it's in our moments of greatest weakness that God's power is most evident. He does not merely step in to help us finish what we started, but He completes what we could never have achieved on our own. How often do we find ourselves struggling under the pressure of tasks that were never meant for us to bear alone? Lewis poignantly addressed this when he spoke of the futility of self-reliance, reminding us that God waits patiently for us to release the illusion of control. Perhaps you have been striving, laboring under the weight of your responsibilities, trying to hold it all together. Could it be that God is gently calling you to let go, to release the need to manage everything, and to trust that His hand is more capable than yours? When we relinquish control, we are not giving up. We are stepping into the reality of God's design for us, a design that was never intended for us to carry the weight of life's struggles alone. Could it be that the very struggle you are facing right now is God's invitation to trust Him more deeply, to learn that His grace is not just sufficient, but abundant. As C.S. Lewis often reminded us, peace doesn't come from self-sufficiency, it comes from knowing that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. So when you feel like your strength is failing, ask yourself, is this the moment where God is inviting me to surrender, to trust in His sufficiency and His plan? Sixth analysis, trusting Christ to fill our gaps. When you decide to trust Christ, have you ever paused to consider the enormity of what that truly means? It's more than a simple act of belief, it's an invitation for Christ to offer you His perfect obedience. Imagine the weight of that. Christ, who lived a life of unwavering loyalty to God, now extends that same perfection to you. This isn't just an abstract concept, it's a transformative act. As C.S. Lewis eloquently stated, the Christian does not think God will love us because we are good, but that God will make us good because He loves us. This resonates deeply when we reflect on the life Christ lived. His death and resurrection were not merely events in history. They were the pivotal moments through which He offered His obedience to us, closing the gaps where we falter. Isn't that what we often struggle with, the fear that we're not enough? Yet, Christ steps in and says, "You don't have to be, I am." Lewis also spoke about this transformation, comparing it to the process of chiseling away at a block of marble until a statue emerges. In his work Mere Christianity, he describes how God uses our weaknesses and shortcomings to mold us into something more like Him. Imagine yourself as a living house, Lewis writes. God comes in to rebuild that house. He is building quite a different house from the one you thought of when we stumble or fall short. Christ doesn't just pick us up, He makes us more like Him. He reshapes us as heirs to God's kingdom, not through our own efforts, but through His shared sonship. This divine mystery that Christ would share His obedience with us is not just a theological idea to be understood. It's a living truth that sustains us when we feel like giving up. How often have you found yourself feeling weak, thinking you can't go on? That's when Christ's perfect obedience becomes your lifeline. In those moments, He fills in the gaps. He does more than just stand beside us. He transforms us from the inside out, ensuring that we continue on, not by our strength, but by His. So, what does it mean for you to let Christ share His obedience with you today? How would it change your life to know that where you fall short, He steps in? When we consider what it truly means to trust in God, do we sometimes wonder if it implies abandoning our personal efforts? C.S. Lewis once noted, God doesn't want something from us. He simply wants us. Trusting in God is not about surrendering the desire to grow in virtue, but rather understanding that He is the source of all transformation. Have you ever experienced moments where your own strength felt inadequate? Perhaps that's the exact moment when grace intervened, gently guiding you. His grace does more than encourage, it reshapes our hearts, giving us the courage to face challenges. In those moments of struggle, can you sense how His strength becomes more evident? Lewis beautifully described our faith journey as a process of being taken out of ourselves and pointed towards something greater. Along this path, we may face trials, doubts, and setbacks, yet these experiences are not signs of failure. Instead, they are opportunities where God's grace becomes tangible. His strength, as Paul wrote in Corinthians, is made perfect in our weakness. Have you considered how these difficulties are actually moments of divine growth? Though we may falter, His unwavering presence never leaves us. In this journey called faith, we are not merely seeking fleeting comfort or temporary pleasures of this world. We are on a pilgrimage toward an everlasting joy that rests solely in the presence of God. But how often do we let the weight of the present cloud our vision of this promise? C.S. Lewis once wrote, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us." His words challenge us to examine the distractions that pull us away from our eternal purpose. When life feels unbearable, and the nights are long with fear or anxiety, can we still cling to the hope that God's grace is sufficient, that His promises never fail? In these moments our hearts ache, and our minds wrestle with the uncertainties of life. But this is where faith grows. The troubles of today, as Lewis also suggested, are like the shadows in a child's room, frightening in the moment, but fleeting when the light of God shines through. What if every hardship is but a training ground, preparing us for the eternal glory God has promised? And in those steps, whether shaky or confident, God remains ever present, offering guidance, strength, and the ultimate assurance that He is leading us to a home that far exceeds anything we could imagine.